guys, it's Biggs. Thanks for stopping by. Now today, on today's video, we're going to talk about this tank behind me. This tank, I've heard mention of it many times, but I've never actually really shown it much at all. This tank has gone through a lot of different phases where I've moved it around the room a few times to try and get the configuration of where I wanted it to be. When I was trying to set up to do this YouTube thing, it took a lot of planning on my part, and it took a lot of planning at the time of year when I just didn't have the time and stuff. So a lot of things got kind of moved around a little bit so I could get this started for you, and then a lot of things just kind of got sat. This tank here is a standard. It's a Perfecto Marineland Perfecto 120-gallon tank. I've had it for about 6 years. And it's always pretty much been one of my planted tanks in the room. Now, it used to be over here in the corner where my desk is now, which you guys often see in the back of the videos. And it was there. It's got like 4 or 5 inches of gravel at the back, and it has like 3 bags of Tropica soil, similar to like those ADA, those nutrient plant soils. So there's 3 bags of it in there underneath that. So it's a very nutrient-rich soil. The tank itself is run with a 20-pound CO2 tank. You can see the diffuser here in the corner. And it runs, and it's on a timer, same as the light, so it shuts off at night. And it's running on an Eheim 3 professional canister filter. The tank is unheated. The lighting is 4 T5 tubes. I use 2 different types. I use Aquasun and I use Fluorasun, and they're T5 tubes from Zoomed. And I use them in that 4 T5 fixture up above, and that's on a timer for 6 hours a day. And I'm running pretty low light plants. Like the tank in its inception over here before was almost all cryptocorenes and stuff. I've never really done a lot of the Amazonian stuff. It's just a lot of them get really, really, really big. I've been to Florida Aquatic a lot, and I see some of these Amazon sword plants, and they're well over 1 meter high. And I just can't accommodate a lot of those ones. So I know it's a fairly big tank for planted tank standards. But the other factor is, Biggs has never done small planted tanks. I never have. I know this is a whole new trend, these nano tanks, and people like Rachel O'Leary and Jennifer Williams and all these people in the Aquatic Gardeners Association. These guys are doing some absolutely breathtaking, stunning, beautiful tanks in these small little environments. I've just never done it. So maybe down the road, that's a future installment for a video. Maybe Biggs will try and do a small tank that he's never done before. But I'm used to doing bigger tanks. So with a 4-foot tank, there's not a lot of plants. There's a lot of plants. But there's not a lot of species of plants in the tank itself. So there's about 150 pounds of maybe 200 pounds of I think it's called Ceru stone. I got that from my good buddy Spencer Jack over at the Aficionados. I just like the gray on gray and the mixed up and stuff like that. But the plants themselves, other than a big chunk of spiderwood, there's some regular Anubias barderi, a massive clump of Bobitis, and Bobitis loves the cooler water, but it also loves the current, so the outputs for the filter are on that side of the tank moving this way. One of my absolute favorite plants is the Anubias caufifolia. I've got it right here in the front. It's just thriving on that one piece. I'm pretty much sure it's going to be adhered to that rock for the entire duration of its life. And then one of my absolute favorites as well is this Crinum calamistratum. I absolutely love the leaf shape, the structure, architecture. I think the plant is absolutely stunning. And then I've got some other Anubias in the background. There's a few cryptocorene Balancea types in the back, and then some sort of fancy moss there drifting all over the wood. I'm sure it's called weeping moss or Christmas moss or whatever. I'm not the plant nerd that I used to be. So I don't know if I'd call this high tech or low. It's definitely not low tech, but I don't think it's also high tech either, because I really don't adhere to a lot of the rules. With my traveling schedule, I get home, I do a water change on the tank, usually about once a week. And I do about anywhere from 30 to 50%. I usually take it down to just before the filter intake starts drying air. I don't have to deal with the filter at all. And then I refill it all up. The tank is used 100% using RO water, which is remineralized using Equilibrium, which is an awesome product by our friends over at Seachem. And otherwise, it's pretty straightforward. I don't really do anything else. I do fertilize, and I know this is going to be a massive bone of contention for people, but I fertilize using Thrive, and the Thrive that I have, I bought a company that was kind of clearing it out, and I bought about 6 bottles of the Thrive that's good for shrimp. Because originally I used to have the Mano shrimp when the tank was over there, and they did really, really good. And when I moved it over here, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. I really don't like big fish. And I'm not in a tank this size. I would love to put nothing bigger than about this big in it, an inch and a half in it, and that's a big fish for this style of tank. It gives the scope of the scape a lot more perspective. And that's why with a lot of these nano tanks, you see a lot of these guys using these little microfish, these different micro rasboras, and that new little celestial danio and all those things. Because these are little tiny centimeter or half-inch size fish and stuff. And that's perfect when you put them in a nice little school in a little tiny tank. But even on a big tank, I think smaller fish, not little, but smaller fish, give the tank a bit more grander scope. So I'm not really certain what to put in here. All that's in here right now, honestly, is there's 6 Pandagera, which is an absolute favorite fish of mine. Down the road, we'll show you how to breed those guys. They're kind of a unique species. They're very, very rarely bred in captivity, but they are breedable. And then the only other thing in here, and this thing is kind of slowly taking over because I'll show you guys in the videos of the close-ups of the tank, is a Xenotoka lion's eye Tamazula, which is a Cares species. And this species is basically borderline extinct in the wild. It needs our help. It needs to be in Aquarius tanks. It needs to be preserved. It needs to be shared. We need to maintain the integrity of the fish. But it's a really, really cool live bear. I believe it's Mexican. I very well may be wrong. I didn't fact check that for you, but we can. We'll post it up there and we'll find out exactly where it's from. But it's a gorgeous, gorgeous, unique little fish. The only problem with it is a bit boisterous. It's a bit aggressive, more so with itself than others. So if you were to keep things like angelfish, perhaps with long veiled tails, or gouramis, things with long pectorals and finer fins, rams, things like that, they're a little bit more delicate, that can't handle any of the abuse or harassment, maybe that's not the choice selection for you. But they're an awesome little fish and they're great for algae eating. And as I said, the tank's unheated, so my selection of fish is a little bit different. This tank sits at room temperature for me, which is about 70 degrees, 21 degrees, depending on whether you're on the Fahrenheit or Celsius scale. I don't know. What do you guys think? You guys give me some comments down there. Think what other fish I'd put in there. My original plan was to take all the fish out and fill it with a mano shrimp and then like a whole pile of crystal reds. I love crystal reds. They're one of my favorites. I don't care how fancy everybody wants to get with all their shrimps. I just absolutely love crystal red shrimps, and I prefer the ones with the lower grades that are more red and white instead of almost all white. That's just me. Everybody like what you like, but I like crystal reds. And they're easy to grow. They work good for me, and I think they would do really cool in there. But for me to do that, I'd have to totally take the tank entirely apart again and remove every single one of those live bears out of there, because they would definitely make a meal of every baby shrimp that would ever be born in that tank. Now this tank's been up and down, as I said, with things. It's definitely obviously not a high-tech tank. There's a massive clump of bulbitis on the left-hand side here. It's huge. This thing would fill half a garbage can because the tank's 2 feet deep. Just some regular Anubias bardrai at the back. One of my favorite Anubias is I've always loved it. Needs a bit of trimming, as you can tell. Maybe I should have trimmed it up for the video, but you guys know me. I'm pretty real. I'm pretty raw, so I like to just show it as is. It's Anubias cophifolia, and one of my all-time favorites, the Crinum calamistratum. Now you see on the Crinum, there's a lot of dead ends. I was one of those guys that used a product that's not a product I would ever recommend again, so I'm not really going to say the name of the product, but the product is out there, and it's sold as a natural carbon source, and you can add it like into a fertilizer regime. And when you start doing a bit more higher tech plant tanks, you read about this stuff is absolutely poison. And I had a bit of an algae break in this tank, and the guys weren't taking care of it, and I had a bit of algae growing on all the plants and stuff. There's still a little bit on the bulbitis there. You can still see it in different spots on the leaves. You can see some algae, little carpets of algae and stuff like that. So I'm going to just, I bumped up the CO2 a little bit, replaced the light bulbs, cleaned it up a little bit, and I think nature will take its course and clean itself up on its own. But what I did is that product actually burnt the tips of a lot of my Crinum leaves, and I actually had to rip them off and stuff like that. I was really concerned that the tank was going to go downhill really, really fast. Even that weeping moss in the back there that's just attached to all the branches, that all of a sudden turned almost yellow overnight, and I really thought I'd done a number on the tank, and the tank was going to go downhill really, really fast. But that was only a couple of weeks ago, maybe a week and a bit, and it seems to have bounced back fairly nicely. Now, I told you I'm not a high-tech plant guy. I've done the high-tech plant tanks, back in the day with the metal halide lighting and CO2, and all that stuff was kind of in its infancy. Now, I'm definitely not ever going to say I'm on par with some of these absolute legends out there, these guys doing these amazing aquascapes in these super high-tech planted tanks. But planted tanks for me are always been a focus in my fish room. They've always been fun in my fish room. Aquascaping is relaxing, it's peaceful, it's enjoyable. Spend that time doing it. You're creating your own environments. And I like, I guess you'd call these type of biotopes the wild or jungle styles or whatever it is. I don't really have a name for it. I just enjoy it. I enjoy playing with it. And just sitting down here in front of this tank, most people would say, oh, this is relaxing, enjoying the fish. No, I'm already looking at, okay, I'd change this and I'd change that. And I have my water current coming in from the left-hand side there. And I'm thinking, well, what if we put the crinum? We were kind of reversed everything. We got the crinum there, and then they really started growing the leaves up, and then everything would kind of show a lot more movement going to the right side of the tank if the crinum was on the left, because then all the leaves, instead of coming up and opening like a fan like that, they'd all kind of go to the surface and then they'd float towards the right. But maybe in a 6 or 8 foot tank that would really make a big difference, but in a 4 foot tank, it's not really going to make a difference. One of my other favorite plants that I used to have in here for years was the Aquarium, the Madagascarensis, the Madagascar lace leaf plant, and absolutely love that plant. It's still one of my absolute faves. But the problem is, in this tank, even though it's got a 4 foot by 2 foot footprint, one Madagascar lace plant could literally swallow this tank when you put it into kind of a semi-high-tech system. And a Madagascar leaf plants, some people think they're delicate. I honestly, I've never had any issue with them, and I think they're better suited to a tank that is slightly less high-tech, slightly lower light, so the plant actually grows a little bit slower, and I think you get to enjoy it for a more period of time. When you put the highly nutritive type substrates, some of the different ones on the market, and there is, I think there's 2 bags or 3 bags of the Tropica brand substrate below this gravel, and you put those type of things in there for these plants that grow cyclic, like the Aponogetans, where they grow seasonally and then they die back, and they grow seasonally and they die back. These things, when they have all those nutrients available, when they're in their active growth phase, they are just absolutely explosive. And I found with my cases that they grew so fast that they overtook the tank, and it wasn't pleasing. My cases might be a little bit different than everybody else as well, because I'm not sitting in my fish room every single day. With my career, I travel a lot, coming to see different people, you guys out there in the different clubs and the different conventions and stuff. I travel for those, plus I travel for about 2 weeks out of a month for my work. So I don't get the same amount of time where I get to sit back and watch everything kind of develop sometimes. So sometimes when I come back and I see something that's kind of completely overtaken the tank, I don't like that as much. So I rather something a little bit slower. This tank, in its previous inception, was over in the other side of the room, was primarily all cryptocorenes, and a lot of them did not handle the move very, very well, so a lot of them did melt down a little bit. I did have some, but I also sold a pile of them when I took it down because I just had so many of them. I took them to the local Aquarium Society auction and moved a bunch of plants then before doing the move. It made it a lot easier. And I think we're going to change it up again, but I don't know what. Yeah, I absolutely love the leaf structure of Anubias caudifolia, where you get the merging stems are red when they come out, and those nice pressed leaves. Absolutely love that species. I think it's absolutely gorgeous. It's hard not to be fully impressed by a species like these crinums. It's a big plant. If I take it out of the tank, I bet you it's going to be 5 feet, 6 feet long. Lots of leaves. All these different types of mosses. You know, back in me being an old guy back in the day, everybody just called these Java moss, and now there's like all these different species, and there's weeping mosses and Christmas mosses, and I don't even have a clue, and I'm not even going to challenge trying to figure out what all this stuff is. That's up for you guys. You guys are the nerds. I just appreciate it. It grows nice for me. It's a beautiful plant. You can see the bulbitis is literally everywhere in the tank. It's a massive, massive ball of it. The Anubias. I do have some, regular, let's call them pond snails. They're in there, and they were there right from the get-go, so they're kind of hard to get rid of. Look at that beautiful little boy. Hello, Mr. Xenotoka. How you doing? You're kind of cool. Yeah, the females are pretty nondescript, not the most exciting of live bears, but the betrothed happy couple. And you see babies are just literally everywhere in the tank. Panda gares, for some reason, seem to really enjoy floating around and playing around in the bubbles of the CO2 mixer. Now, to give you an idea, guys, on how serious my tech side is, I'm going to give you a quick rundown of what's running the 120 gallon. Most of it's been running it for years and years and years. But you can see the CO2 thing there. That's the only piece of fancy tech that there actually is in the room whatsoever for me. I'm using the old school Fluval 4-tube fluorescent T5 fixtures. I like the fluorescence, and you guys will understand if you watch my video on LED, which will be coming up as well. And I'm running a nice big Eheim 3 Professional. And I'm running a 20-pound CO2 tank. Nothing fancy. It's got its little bubble counter going there. And that's all to it. As for fertilizer regime, well, when I'm home, I do a weekly water change, usually of about 40-50%. And I tip the bottle, and some falls in. And that's about it. And then the water I take out of the tank, I use it to water some of the orchids and some of the house plants and whatnot and everything like that. And everything seems to work good. I know that's going to enrage piles of you plant nerds out there, but hey, it's been working for me, and this is by no means a super high-tech plant tank, so I can appreciate the guys are the purists that want to have those really high-tech tanks. I fully understand that. I was that way years and years ago too. I'm just sure not going down that path anymore today, because I'm not here to watch and control and monitor like I would be, like I was years ago. So I'm just going to sit back and enjoy my tank the way it is now and have fun doing it. Look at those little garas just going to town on the little remnants of food. The babies everywhere. That's such a cool little fish. Maybe down the road we'll give you some insight on how to breed the garas. I know that the more popular gara that everybody talks about is the one that's used as a spa fish for people for soaking their feet and eating the dry skin or dead skin. Yeah, that's just weird. All they need is a leech. They just need Larry. Larry can help you with anything that ails you. You just need a Larry. Hope you enjoyed, guys. Thanks.